welcome to another episode of Top Lines and Tales, your weekly livestock podcast. And as always, we'd like to thank our sponsors, Harbro, for their continued support. One of the privileges I get by running this podcast and by writing history books that I do get to speak to some very smart and very, indeed, pleasant people. And a while ago, I got to speak to a man called Jim Stobo. And Jim, who received an OBE, died earlier this year, but it was a fundamental character in the UK cattle business. And through an association that I had with the Royal Smithfield Show, I got to know Jim some 40 years ago, I think, and where his quiet and effective demeanour was such a welcoming voice in amongst the heat of that great show. In February 2013, I caught up with him for an informal chat at his home. And among Jim's accolades he held in his 89 years was President of the NFU, President of the Royal Smithfield Club, Chairman of Squabble, which later went on to be QMS, of course, and twice President of the Aberdeen Angus Society, President of the Longridge Towers School, and President of the Magdalen Foundation, and various other appointments that he had. And he established his Fishwick herd of Aberdeen Angus cattle in Kelso in the 1950s, so a man had a lot of history in Aberdeen Angus, and he was also noted for the fact that he won the Royal Smithfield Show with an animal called Highland Princess in 1956. Jim was also a great breeder of Border Leicester sheep and later South Country Cheviots. Jim later in life retired to Nabdeen, just along the road from Fishwick, and he cultivated his business career by helping many people and organisations while also maintaining a reduced Aberdeen Angus herd until, as well as his flock of Border Leicester. So I had a great privilege of talking to Jim there, and I recorded that information. I've had to cut quite a bit of it out because some of it was quite controversial. Jim was a man who was quite good at speaking his mind, but a man of a mine of information as well. So I'm privileged to be able to share this with Top Lines and Tales. I hope his family won't mind me sharing these words that Jim gave to me. So please enjoy your 40 minutes chat that I had with the great Jim Stobo 10 years ago. Lovely spot you have here.
It's a nice spot, it's a nice place to live.
You get a few ducks on the pond there, will you?
We do. With swans too. We've had swans 3 different years.
We started off talking about limousines.
George Cormack, he lived down in that cottage there, and he had the buildings after I stopped and did his livery job in these buildings.
Oh, I didn't realise that. Okay.
But George contended that they had split into 2 types. The sort of Stirling Perth type and the Carlisle type.
Yes, yeah, that would be true.
And he reckoned that the Perth type was the more durable.
The Perth type would be bigger ended, wouldn't they? Bigger ended, and that was the same this time.
We then got on to more familiar ground, talking about Aberdeen Angus.
I suppose I got interested in the 1950s and I bought my first heifers in about 1955. Right, okay. But it was always a sideline all my life. And after I retired from Fishwick along here, I kept 80 odd acres, and I tried to copy what I'd seen the men on Speyside do, having maybe 6 cows and breeding consistently a decent bull. And I got it reasonably good towards the end. I had some good bulls. I had misfortunes with bulls. I bought a reserve champion in Perth from Glendyne, and he started to produce silver calves. I put him to the eye.
Really?
Yeah. Okay. Canadians, when accosted about it, said, "Oh, there was some creative breed improvement."
They wouldn't worry about it if they were silver.
But we had to withdraw him from the eye. Luckily, we'd sold a lot of semen off him, and I sold a good bull that was second in his class to the Galcantry bull that made 17,000. And George was suspicious that they were conscious of the problem and didn't want him to come into the top because he would not be acceptable to pedigree breeders.
I think there's some, we'll go back to the 50s and the 60s in a minute, but there is some school of thought that when the Canadian cattle started coming in, that there probably should have been some sort of upbreeding program that would allow these Canadian cattle to filter themselves in quietly, and anything that hadn't got a genuine history, because a lot of these things only got one generation in the pedigree, and then it's waffle after that. So they should have let them come in and filtered them in slowly.
That would have been sensible. But that's hindsight is a great thing.
Indeed. But when were you at Fish? When did you retire from?
Oh, in 91. None of my family wanted to farm. I mean, it's as easy as that. My son is in Singapore and working in Hewlett-Packard. Computers. It's quite different.
I got into that myself, into computer business, and it's a lot more profitable.
Well, he's been in it all his career. I mean, he went there right from the beginning. My Angus career really was about that. Just I managed to sell at the end. Stuart Edison, he bought a cow from me. She was a Yuxet from Edvis. It got by chance the World Forum that didn't happen.
Oh, right, yeah.
I was parachuted in to be president that year, and there was an upset in the breed. Tom Arnott stood down from doing it.
When was that? What year was that?
2002, it would have been. Should have been. It was the foot and mouth stock, you see.
Of course.
And but Tom stood down. I was in the sheds at Glimpton looking for a bull for the Castle of May, who had a daughter's son in Perth from Ballindarrach. Was it 8,000 the bull made this time?
Yes.
A very neat, a shapely bull. But the phone rang there, and as this was Tom, would I do this job? And he wasn't doing it. So I said, well, I need to talk to my wife, which I did, and I think she realised, yes, I had to do it, so I became president. But with the World Forum coming, I had to try and get a string of cattle that I could show as president. Yes. I thought that was the thing to do. And we had everything except a 2-year-old heifer.
Right.
And I went up and bought this heifer from Alistair. And Stuart got her, and he got a big price for a daughter out of her. But the cattle I had them breeding. I had, luckily, when I was president, we went on and developed the Aberdeen Angus Beef Club, which was to try and close the link with the commercial end of the market, which is the market. I mean, the breeders have never recognised that, sadly. There's not one of them is a commercial footing.
I think there are one or two, but certainly a lot of them aren't.
It's not. I mean, but we said that we were doing this, and we went to Angus Stobo's with a group of journalists, and he had this cow with a good bull calf at foot, and the cow was a Castle of May bred, and so I knew the female line, and I negotiated with him. It took months of negotiation, but I got the bull bought. Potemkin Quiet Major, and he was a great big chap. He really was a big one, and we got to the point that we had daughters to serve, and I judged the Highland and put an Irish bull that Billy Glazebrook was showing champion. And I thought, now this is the bull. There was a AA Willie Boy bull come out of Canada, and wasn't used widely enough when he was alive and around. And then we realised that his females were doing a tremendously good job. So Potemkin Quiet Major carried his blood, and this Irish bull, his mother was by AA Willie Boy.
Okay.
There was a double cross in Potemkin Quiet Major and half. So I was like, we'll have a go at this. I bought the bull from Billy. And Billy saw the Quiet Major bull, and he bought him in part exchange.
Right, okay, that works.
And then the next year he took him to the Highland Show, and John Tilson judged and made him male champion.
Right, okay.
And I think if he had maybe known what the bull was, he would have put him further, but he was a strange owner, and
sure, yes.
but he was male champion, so the last two bulls had both Highland Show championships in there.
What was your involvement, just going back the way, what was your involvement with the breed back in the 60s?
In the 60s, I was on council. I chaired the publicity committee.
Right.
Okay. And was on the general purposes committee, which they had at that time.
Were you involved in the smaller bulls, should I say?
Oh, yes. I mean, there's a picture of me with a bull that came to my thigh. He was a good bull, actually, and Bill Reid at Fort House bought him, and then re-exported him to Argentine, where he did quite well.
Right.
But
whose breeding? Was that your breeding?
My own breeding.
Your breeding back then, yes.
And in Perth, he was in the youngest class, and he was standing second.
Right.
And we were quite jocose.
Yeah,
we were going to get somewhere.
The big classes.
The old market, and at the very end, he was put down third. Fair enough. That was It was Raoul Bancalares did it. The first two went on to be his champion and reserve champion overall.
Okay.
So that was the closest I ever got to.
It was very close.
Oh, great honour.
And he went out onto the Argentine...
Eventually, but he went via Bill Reid at Fort House. He was used there. I think even at the time Bill was selling up, there was still some of his blood in the Fort House herd. And I had another one that Keith Bromley bought, and he re-exported him.
Oh, right, okay.
He could sell them better than I could, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, they were obviously interesting times when the US and the Argentines were looking
it was a different market.
But they were buying families, by all accounts, or buying particular pedigrees, weren't they?
They made it fairly plain where their Newhouse had a tremendous run, and the Ernest Kerr lines, they had a tremendous run. Then I had a wee bullock that we showed at Smithfield, and a little bullock that was bred by Walter Ross Taylor, with whom I'd shared a bull. And he was in a Duke of Norfolk winning team in Smithfield.
Okay. I was going to go back to the Smithfield years in a bit, because obviously that's where I know you from. Yeah. But you seem to be... You've been in the breed, and you know a lot of people in the breed. I would say.
Yes, a lot of the people. I mean,
you've been sort of well connected in amongst the breeders.
Yeah, I think maybe that's of my whole life. That's been the feature, is the people I've met and the contact. It endures. It's
And with going back to Castlemay, would you advise through them? When did Martin Leslie take over?
Martin Leslie was the factor. He was factorable moral first, and then and at the Castlemay, and then when he was due to retire, the Queen Mother said, "Would he please stay?"
Okay.
So he decided that he would, and he did eventually retire when she died. And I was a trustee by then.
You were a trustee, that's okay.
96 she set up the trust. Reputedly, the lawyer, Boyd Carpenter, had said to her, "I think, ma'am, there should be a farmer on your trust." Because she had laid out very specific objectives for the trust she envisaged. And she's reputedly said, "I know Mr. Stobo, he'll do." It was like that. So I don't know. She never told me that.
Okay, fair enough. No, I knew there was some involvement in that.
That was a Smithfield thing she too, because she had a heifer at Smithfield that was second in its class, and it was the days when she came for the sale, and I was sitting with her at the sale, and the beast made 2,600. And it was bought by Safeways. And there was no doubt, it was just at the time they were opening their big place at the Gyle at Edinburgh. And she turned and said, "They won't be going to slaughter that." Well, I said, "At the price, ma'am, it's unlikely." But I will go and see them. So we had to rearrange the tour, you know what these tours in Smithfield were like. And she told them in no uncertain terms they were not to slaughter it. So I went back. Immediately she had left the show to Safeway, and I said, "Look, I've probably landed you in it with this. If I can help, I will." So the beast went to a chap down there in Belgian Blues early on.
Robin Ivory.
Well, he got the beast back from Smithfield and showed her at the Royal.
Oh, right, okay.
Where she was fourth, and then
as a pure,
and the Alistair Grant, then chairman of Safeway, took her into his name, and she came here, and lived, and the progeny began to build up. When Alistair Grant died, I think there were three, and these trustees approached me, would I be interested to take them? Well. I thought, yes, just keep them. So I bought them from the trustees.
And them back here.
Then I had one decent bull, but again, he was caught in the foot and mouth year. I got a private sale for him and got him away, which was the same year that I sold the bull that went to Lucas at Chiclaw, Jubal Eric, Tweedside, who bred Lucas a lot of good cattle. He got them far too cheaply.
Yes.
But that was foot and mouth.
Foot and mouth, and I said, you have to go where you can. But if you're getting bulls away into...
Based on the research that I was doing, I wanted to hear more and more about the olden time.
To the 60s or 60s and the 70s time, did you get out to the Argentine and see any other?
I got to the Verona Fair to try and sell cattle, and at a later stage in my career, I was on the British Agricultural Export Council and chaired their livestock group, and that got me around some of the places. And obviously, I had a pedigree interest.
Yes.
Irvin Robbie, who was the secretary in the 60s when I was doing the publicity committee, we had Portuguese wanted to buy cattle, but we couldn't get licenses from Portugal as a country. And Bursby, remember Harry Bursby, who was the
name rings a bell,
the Frisian Cattle Society secretary.
Ah, yes,
quite a grand gentleman, Harry. He had been to Portugal and couldn't get licenses. Irvin Robbie and I went, and we got in touch with a man, Ribeiro, who farmed up the Tagus, and Ribeiro was a sort of prince among his own people. He was the chairman of the cooperatives, and all the things. A very successful man. And he got us to Dr. Portugal, who was the man who would grant the import license, at 6 o'clock on a Saturday night. And we drank a bottle of wine with Dr. Portugal and made our case. Oh yes, you'll get cattle, get your licenses.
Really?
And came home, so we then set about asking for the licenses. And he denied that he'd ever get it.
They're going now, I think, Portugal.
Well, they're buying a lot of cattle.
Big buyers at the moment, No, I think there's quite a lot going out. There's quite a lot going throughout Europe now, I think, isn't there? The demand is growing.
Just a slight danger in the thing, which just a personal thing, but there's a risk of starting to breed for these female sales and for bull sales.
Yes.
And it's a danger. And it's noticeable that suddenly they've got excited about the milk figures in the breed, which have not really been a problem in terms of rearing Angus cattle. But they're seeing the female sales.
They want the milk in there because they can sell it in the females. No, the figures is a whole ball game on its own.
Well, that was another thing that I did get concerned with as president. I became very aware that the different recording systems didn't mesh.
Right.
And
would you be around about the time when they changed from the Signet to the Abbey one?
It was through.
Well, around about that year, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, Marion Tilson was my technical committee chairman.
Okay.
And I commissioned her. I said, look, go and look at all the systems and come back and see which one we want to be on, and we'll get them to mesh. And now at least you can buy from most parts of the world. The Angus cattle are all, the language is common.
And bring the figures in, and it wasn't a technical difficulty. I think it was more a political difficulty, wasn't it?
Almost politics. At the time. Most of these things are.
I was involved in it because I wrote a software system in 1997.
I remember you did. I talked to you at one stage about getting it. Yeah.
And the idea of that was that it would communicate with all these various people, but a lot of them sort of held across up to the fact that they would take data in and take it out. And I think the Australian managed to take that one forward. But the figure side of it is an interesting. Looking at it from a history point of view, some people took the figures on early on. I mean, John Elliott said, well, originally they dismissed me as a figures man, but he didn't say they're laughing on the other side of the face now. But to that effect, the figures have taken him to where he is.
It is a very valuable tool. I don't think anyone denies it, but. Sadly, some of the guys that are in the trade now, they're not looking at the cattle enough.
No,
they're just looking at the figures. And they're paying a lot of money for indifferent cattle. I've never seen a good bull with really bad figures.
No.
But I've seen a lot of bad bulls with really good figures.
Yeah.
And it's...
I think that's the consensus, really, that you look at the cattle first and then the figures and not the other way around. And the trouble is now a lot of these catalogues go out and people have got preconceived ideas before they even arrive at the sale. Just based on pedigrees and figures without even looking at the animal. And that's dangerous, I think. So.
I spoke at the World Forum that did take place in this country at Aviemore in 1977. And I said there that I thought that if the forum could establish common standards by which the cattle were assessed, that would be a great service to the breed, and let breed improvement take care of itself. Yeah. That if somebody wanted an extremity, that's fine, but don't judge to what is a current fashion or perception of breed improvement.
Yeah, I think at the time in '77 they were all reeling from what they really realised they hadn't learned from was to going down a fashionable route that got them into a cul-de-sac, and I think they were probably ready to listen to.
They didn't want to listen to me doing that,
didn't they?
We carried on chatting about figures and covered a little bit of some of the American breeders, but the conversation came back to the same place.
Well, those guys measured just about everything there was to measure. But
I remember Billy Arnott, Tom's father, going around with a measuring stick, measuring the height to the withers, and that was. I don't think he bought many bulls on the basis of that yardstick. But
no, that's interesting, and but the thing is, people say how small the cattle were in the 60s, but a lot of them actually were very young, weren't they? A lot of them were calves. I mean, they look in the picture small, but in actual fact, when they're only 11 months old to 17 months old, there's a lot of difference.
That man I was talking about, he was April born,
yes,
and he was being sold in the February following.
10 months. Well, the same with the Lindetis bull. I don't think he was a year old, was he?
No, he wasn't much old. And I dressed a bull for Ross Taylor that made, what did he make? Received 32,000.
He was talking about Everell of Wandle, who sold for 29,000 to Bob Adam in, I think, 1961.
Ross Taylor now, is that?
Wandle,
okay, yes.
It was Monger's Walls here in Berkshire.
Ah, right.
And Walter had asthma, and he moved to the west and had no asthma after through there. And I shared bulls with him for quite a time too.
Okay.
But I was quite pleased with the dressing of that bull.
Yes, I would think so, if he made that sort of money. Certain. I think there was a buzz about it in those days. If the Stetson came around the corner, everybody started scurrying around in circles.
There was one amazing character came. He was a Texan, Johnson by name, and he stood and he chewed tobacco. And he had a competition with himself to see how far along the passage he could spit. And I mean, he could spit about 30 feet, you know. It was
interesting characters. And there were a few gamblers back then as well, weren't there? There were men who bought bulls and gambled them away.
Yeah, but they were, I mean, Schofield, Mowbray Alexander, they were actually extraordinarily good cattlemen. Yes, they really knew what they were looking at.
They would have to be.
They could see the
time they put an expense to get that. I think they got their fingers burnt on a few of them, but by the time they put that expense to them to go.
I don't know whether it was empty in the Angus breed, like Bertie Drummond was in the short run.
Oh, right.
Cuggleton had short runs.
Jim was, of course, referring to Bertie Marshall.
Jim Bigger's second wife, Irene, was Bertie's daughter.
Oh, right, okay.
But he lived in Ayr, and he had farms right down to Stranraer, and he travelled through the week out. But he took 3 months in the Argentine every year, developing the market for his cattle and seeing what they were looking for, the trends, and very professional.
I then went on to ask Jim about some of the other posts that he'd held in agriculture.
8 years on the Homegrown Sales Authority.
And what, Homegrown Sales?
Yeah, and there was a vacancy came up. I was due to stand down. I'd done my 2 terms. And, a vacancy on Meat and Livestock Commission, and I got a telephone. Well, I was at Smithfield again. Would I accept a nomination from the Scottish Farmers Union to go to the MLC? I said, oh yes, that would be more my line than cereals. I was really interested. And it was the chairman of MLC. It doesn't matter anyway. But he rejected the nomination because he said he would make trouble. How right he was. I saw this in grave need of stirring up.
I think that's an honour when you're told you're going to make trouble because
one of the viewpoints for my history research, one of the reasons I was there was to sort of ask him about the breed through its ages and how it was going forward.
Well, I suppose, what was your opinion of the cattle when they started bringing them into the country?
I mean, the first ones we saw came to a Highland show from Card, and they were just so different. I mean, I think it was maybe unfortunate that he introduced them to a Highland show. Where they presented nothing but a quandary to the judge. They were so different.
Campbell Graham, I think, was the first one to bring
that was John Graham, it was his father.
Oh, it was his father?
His father,
Beg your pardon, yeah.
And I think maybe with hindsight again, it's easy, but you'd have been better just to have given them time to be seen informally before that. However, they were so different that people began to look. And there was another string, the McLarns at Claslochy.
Yes.
And the one at Bankhead of Kinloch. They had a big bull, Iroko.
Iroko of Bankhead.
Who was also breeding big. And I think there was a certain sort of reticence to get involved with the Canadian ones when these other cattle that were getting bigger progeny.
You and Bruce told me that his father found a bull, I think it was family's brother-in-law or somebody down
in Northumberland,
in Northumberland, and brought him up there, and he said he was probably breeding. He was just a commercial bull, so they had a big problem to get the papers with him.
That's right, and sadly he too began to show little stubs of horn, which minimised his impact. But he was a good bull. I remember him.
William McLaren said that he said, Bob Adam used to say that what kept the Angus honest was the every fourth generation, the short-horn bulls that's from the Spey, and that's to a point, a lot of that short-horn blood is
absolutely right.
It's still in their back. Get away with it. They could.
In the late 50s and through the 60s, I went up to Speyside to buy suckled cows to fatten and to show. I was looking for show cows, and that undoubtedly was the way they did it. And just every now and again they got an outcross.
Every fourth one, especially they could find the dark short-horn bulls to use as well.
And then I really dropped a clanger.
And what did you think about some of these Canadian things coming in? Some of the extreme ones, like Sunset Acres Bang and
Sunset Acres Bang, I owned. So
oh, you did. He was one of yours. Wasn't
I was joint owner of him.
Right. He was big though, wasn't he?
He was big. He won the Highland twice and was overall champion once.
But he was as about as extreme as it went. I would have thought the cattle in this country.
He was shapely in his extremity.
Were they a necessary evil, or whether the way? I mean, the fact they won the Highlanders obviously can't be all bad. But
it was the route to achieving
getting the
bigness.
size.
I mean, I think they're probably as big now as they want to be.
Yeah.
But I think you talk just a big that was maybe the other big bull that George bought at that time, Windover Justifier. George showed him at the Highland and won it. And I think he won the Royal with Justifier as well. Okay. Justifier maybe actually bred more than Bang. And certainly my problem with the Bang females I had was mating them with something else.
Yes.
I couldn't get anything that would nick.
No.
And I tried several bulls on the Bang daughters, but just couldn't get them to.
But did he lift them quite a lot? Bang, did he lift the cows up quite a lot?
Oh yes, Lord, yes. He gave me size in 2 years. It was. He did that.
Going on to the Aberdeen Angus brand, I mean, from how I see it, the breed went down the way and left the door wide open for the Charolais, and latterly the scimitars and scimitars, and latterly the limousines came in, and I think that, to me anyway, or from a history point of view, it looks that way, that the demand for the Angus was driven then by consumer demand rather than by the cattle themselves. Yeah. So although they'd improved the cattle, the demand was being driven, and George was very, very involved in
marketing. He did a great job with that
as a brand.
He was involved.
Was he on council with you when he was?
No, he was after me. I wasn't involved in the marketing that way at the time I was on council. It was publicity I was charged with. But George did a great job with that butcher shop that he did.
It was creating the Aberdeen Angus brand. I know there was a steakhouse driven by America as well.
The one man that was true to the commercial thing and saw the commercial thing was Tom Bruce. Tom Bruce was fattening a lot of cattle. Yeah. He knew what the market took and was good. But that market changed too. I mean, I used to take 8 cattle every weekend to Edinburgh, and I trimmed them before they went, and I could almost say, that one will go to this butcher, that one will go to that one. Yeah. You knew the kind they wanted. But then the roasts went out of fashion. Yeah. It was strip loins. one of the Edinburgh butchers told me, I said, at one time we used to bring the roasts back from the cattle in Fife and send our forequarters over to Fife, where they would stew meat and the Edinburgh professional people would roast it.
To do with money.
Changed. The miners got onto a fairly good level compared to what they'd been. And they were grilling and the professional classes in Edinburgh, who maybe had better training in domestic science and things, they were prepared to make stews and goulashes.
So the whole eating
the whole thing just changed.
Yeah.
And it has changed further since.
And then, of course, came the rise of the supermarkets and the demise of the small butcher as a direct parody of each other. Which can I move on to the Smithfield side? I mean, that's the side of you that I know really that the Aberdeen Angus ruled the roost in Smithfield for it shared the roost with Shorthorn for a while, but I mean it ruled the roost for a long time, and that to me is part of the chapter of a book. I mean,
Shorthorns and Angus, the one we had, the champion bred by Ben Coots, and
you won the champion. That was a Shorthorn, wasn't it?
No, she was a Shorthorn Cross Angus.
Princess.
The Long River Highland Princess.
That was 57.
57, that's right. But then Bertrug, who went to, not Bert, his brother, went to Witch Cross and was the herdsman there.
Oh, right, okay.
With a lot of the Newhouse lines of cattle.
Yeah.
Samuel had them, and he won Smithfield several times. You'll get that in the Smithfield history.
The live and dead side of it in Smithfield again, I think was a very useful eye-opener.
Very useful.
Useful eye-opener to the agriculture side, and
it was a tremendous way to learn what came out from under the skin of the beast you'd seen, the kind of beast, kind of shape.
My first year there in '76, and it opened my eyes. In fact, I won the Stockman's Judging Cup in '76. I think I've got a photograph of being presented by it, and I have an idea you're on the picture actually. I think
really
presented by Prince Michael again. I was 17, and I won the Stockman's Judging Cup for judging them live and then judging them judging them live, and then where they came back down, I won the big cup of I've still got there somewhere. I had long hair and a scruffy moustache and probably a hangover in those days.
Probably when you did your best work.
Yes, possibly so. But I think that was. I think I'm pretty sure it was 77. That was.
I judged the cattle in '68, was it? And that was Oscar Colburn's Hereford I put up.
Hereford,
first time they'd been up in a long time.
Yeah.
He was a very shapely chap.
We then got chatting a little bit more about the modern beef industry, which of course Jim was very much involved.
Angus cattle out of dairy cows is what they're saying at the moment, because they think they still get the marbling if it comes out of a Holstein. But I think this is being driven by the US, so it'd be interesting to see if Tesco get involved, whether we run out of cattle.
That was claimed, you see, in the early days of the figures from MLC, that if you stripped a carcass from a beef breed and a dairy breed, the yield of meat was the same.
Really?
And it all made burgers.
Yeah.
It was, and that was an American-driven theory that eventually we would be keeping cattle just to make burgers.
They say there's marbling, and a real milky animal has more marbling in it. Again, I don't know the story of that. We used, as an aside, to fatten 500 bull beef Friesians, and it was all Friesians. I used to buy calves when I first left school, and we'd put 10 or 15 a week into Kidderminster every week, but they were 800 and 900 weight youngsters, full of been inside all their lives, full of barley, and they went straight into
they were good beef. Straight Friesians were good beef.
Yeah, it was good. But when the Holstein came in, it kind of killed that, and we got into Charolais and various things, and they wouldn't.
The last good herd of Friesians I saw was Mary Mead, Yo Valley.
Right.
And at that time, which is maybe 6 years ago now, she had 4 bulls standing in AI centres and getting a good demand for people trying to put a bit more shape onto the Holsteins.
Yeah, well, they're not interested in shape the Holsteins at the moment anyway. Maybe that'll come back, but at the moment they're not.
We then harp back to those days in the 60s where the animals were a lot fatter, and this is what Jim had to say.
Nobody really worried about the health side of it, which nowadays you put a beast that fat in front of people and they all scream.
Lifestyles have changed so enormously. I mean, the guys were working manually,
grafting,
and burning off a hell of a calories, and that was a way to replenish calories.
I suppose so. So it wasn't as wrong as people think. It's not maybe the fat that was the problem. It's
the indolence of people nowadays.
People becoming lazy. You were involved in the Highland Show?
Not directly. I was a director in 1960. In the 1960s, I mean, in the days when it was John Arnott, Tom's grandfather, and Matthew Templeton, James Durno, that sort of time. I think I'm probably the furthest back year director who's still alive.
Okay. No,
and certainly the last one who judged cattle in the Waverley Market, the Scottish National Show. I'm the last one alive of those that did that.
That's the Scottish National Festival.
Again, we went forward to the modern Angus.
On that side of it, really, what I'd like is a comment of some sort of way do you think the breed is going now? Because I think there's the two different objectives. One, certainly with the Angus cattle going smaller, they're going to end up with a different breed in America that we have here, and America is still a huge driving force in Angus.
Yeah, but that'll also change. I mean, they're able. The American thing is to have a cow at 500 kilos, producing 500 kilos. Because the cows are still carrying quite a lot of genetics of size, they can do it when they put these smaller, tidier bulls onto them. But when the females from that carry it on, they'll get into small, bushy cattle very quickly.
Deja vu is the word you'd look for there, I think, because it's happened in the past, and we're in danger of doing it again. That's what maybe sort of question it really.
My contacts with M&S, they said quite openly that what they wanted was 2 sirloin steaks, 500 gram weight in a pack, to cook well. If the cattle are too big, the sirloin is big and the steaks are too thin and they don't eat well. If the cattle are too small, the steaks are too thick. And sirloin steaks that are terribly thick don't eat well. And that was where they said their ideal was a 550 kilo live, 4L.
Yes.
That was about their grade that they found optimum.
Thanks again, Jim. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Top Lines and Tales, and I hope you enjoyed that one where I brought to you a conversation from 10 years ago with the great Jim Stobo. So I hope you enjoyed that. Also, thanks, of course, to our sponsors, Harbro. We're always grateful to, and Harbros, of course, are suppliers and manufacturers of high-quality nutrition and nutritional advice. So look them out and see what Harbro can do for you and your business. They specialise in the pedigree area, but they feed commercial livestock across the board as well, and a range of buckets and a range of shops, of course. So get down to your local Harbro store there, or contact your local Harbro representative to find out how they can help you in your livestock business. And you can also look up Harbro on the internet. And while you're there on the internet, don't forget to look out our Top Lines and Tales Facebook page and join in our community there, where you'll find photographs and other things to back up this episode. And please subscribe to hit the follow button on our Top Lines and Tales, which helps you then find out whenever we've put out new episodes, and also helps us get more exposure on the internet. Thank you.